9 a.m. crowd, what is up? I'm impressed that all of you made it. My voice, you can probably hear, is a little ragged, just like all of yours, I'm sure. But I'm going to do my best to do my radio announcer voice and kind of lull you into a nice presence as I give you this talk. So this talk is 30 minutes long, so unfortunately I can't go into literally everything about freelancing. That would be nice, though. So what I'm going to do is have a follow-up video call with those of you who want it, so we're going to do a group call. So if you want to give me your business card at the end of this, I'll send out an email to all of you afterwards, and we'll do like a group chat where you can ask me follow-up questions, because I am certain that after we're done here, you'll be like, okay, I don't have any questions. Then one day later, you'll be like, God damn it. Which happens with every single talk that we ever go to. So I want to give you a little bit more so you can, this isn't the last interaction we'll ever have. Also, make sure you turn off your cell phones, noisemakers, that sort of thing, and also make sure that you fill out the surveys for whatever talks that you go to, including this guy's. And lastly, make sure that you give me your business card at the very end. That's really important so that I can get you on my list to get that all done. So, as we begin, one thing I want to mention to you is that you are running a business. Most people in the music, sound design sense don't actually think about it this way. They think about themselves as artists, which is actually great. I do as well. But we make the mistake of thinking, oh, I'm not running a business, I'm an artist. That means I don't need to think about money. What? That's ridiculous. No. So what we're going to do is help you think in some ways of how businesses kind of think and how you can start thinking about that. That doesn't mean necessarily that you have a Rolodex and that you're chomping a cigar every single day. No. But it does mean that you are thinking about things in a more systematic way. So a little bit about me before we dive into it. My name's Akash Thakkar. I've worked on the sound design for Hyperlight Drifter, some MIDI mock-up work for Destiny Rise of Iron, just released Brass Tactics, which is a VR RTS, just released in the Oculus Store, Heat Signature, which is in the IGF, whoop whoop. And I've given 2 TEDx talks, one on the power of video game music and another on the idea of following your passion being not a good idea. We can talk about that later. And lastly, I just released a book on Monday called Maximizing Game Feel Through Sound, which is now a #1 bestseller on Kindle. Woo! So that is for developers on how they can work with audio people better. Yay! Woo! Like 3 people, just like, yeah, sweet. So, what we're going to cover in today's talk is how business owners think. Obviously, I'm not going to go super in-depth, but how you can start thinking about things to make it so that your work comes more fluidly and that you're not doing the freelance hustle that so many people talk about where you're wondering where the next gig is coming from. How to find great work and what processes you can use to actually get better and better clients. Whether or not you should have a side job and the stigma associated with that. Some contracts and other boring stuff that, you know, we have to cover. And obviously, I want to just remind you that we're going to do a video call follow-up. And lastly, I do want to remind you that the things I say here, my way isn't the only way. I'm going to give you some advice that you should actually take and use as your own. This isn't the only way to actually go about this. And for those of you taking pictures of the slides constantly, I am actually putting these up on my website immediately after. So don't worry about that. So you'll be set. You don't need those grainy photos. So let's go into how businesses think in the kind of intro of this. So they think in systems. What they do is think about their business or their products or whatever it is that they're selling or whatever it is that they're doing in reproducible steps. And systems are actually just a fancy word for habits. It's just a business word for habits. So basically they think, okay, how can I sell this thing or do this thing or give this service in a way that is reproducible? How can I keep getting clients, for example? Or how can I keep selling iPhones or whatever it may be? That's the general gist of how businesses think. They don't think, oh, maybe we'll sell something today. No, they have a procedure and steps that they can go through to reproduce great results every single time. Apple is a great example, and Google, who are just kings of systems. They are amazing at making things fall into place perfectly every single time. So, like I mentioned, you have to make sure you have reproducible steps. So some examples that I want to give you are, okay, let's say you want to find clients. Maybe you want to make a system based off of that goal. I want to find clients who pay me X amount per gig, whatever it may be. What you want to do is start writing down and thinking of this in ways like, okay, what are the steps I can take every month, every week, every year, whatever it may be in differing time frames that I can use to reproduce this? For example, it could be, okay, every year I'll come to GDC. Okay, that's one part of your system. Every week or month, I'll go to a local networking meetup. Okay, great, that's a system. What is my system for following up with people after I meet them? Mine, I use an app called Cloze, C-L-O-Z-E, it's really good, to help remind me who to follow up with and who to keep talking to and what we've talked about. It's a really good app for that. But I have a system for following up with people and talking to people, and I follow it every single time. And I use reminders on my phone to actually remind me what things I need to do. And I even spend Sundays scheduling out that week. Okay, what are my systems for this week? What meetups am I going to go to? That makes it so that these steps actually start to be reproducible. So when you have goals, which are great, I'm a big fan of goals, like, okay, I want to get 6 clients, or I want to get paid for my work, whatever it may be. Write down systems that are associated with it. So write down habits that you can start implementing week to week, day to day, month to month, year to year, on how you can actually start implementing those in your day-to-day life. So if you are trying to get clients, what are the systems? What are the habits that you can do? Showing up to events, talking to people, giving talks or talking to mentors and finding work that way, meeting other people in the audio community, asking if there's any overflow or anything like that, having follow-ups, all that sort of stuff. Those are systems that you can implement underneath the goal. Because when you have a big goal, that's great, but it can be hard to follow step by step when you don't really know what the habits you need to actually get there. If you want to get better at music, what's your practice system? If you want to get better at sound design, what sort of Foley work are you going to do week to week, month to month? Whatever it may be, you need to think about things in that way. So one thing I want to show you in the kind of client getting side of things is a little funnel that I made, and basically what I want you to start thinking about is how you can actually start getting clients and kind of moving people through this funnel in such a way that you get more clients more easily in an authentic, kind of sleaze-free way. I'm all about that. So first up, you have something called prospects. Now, a prospect is someone who may have worked for you at some point in general, but they don't really know who you are. It could be a big company that you know needs music or sound, but you're not sure if they're really interested in you. They don't have a job posting open. There's no opening. You don't know anyone at the company. You don't really have any information on it. But they're a prospect. They're a potential client that you don't really have much information on. Next up is something called a lead. Now, a lead is a client or a potential client that you have a little bit of knowledge on. You know that they're looking for music or sound or whatever it is you do. You have an idea that, okay, they have a job opening on their website, or you heard through the grapevine that they're interested in hiring you. That's kind of a lead, and you know that they're interested, so you kind of have a little bit of an opening. Now, opportunities are when clients come to you or potential clients come to you and say, send us a demo, or we're interested in working with you, what's your rate, that sort of thing. And we're going to talk about answering that dreaded question, what's your rate, later. But when you have an opportunity, basically people are asking you to pitch to them in some way, shape, or form. So you're being asked to show your stuff, or they're just generally asking, what's your rate, or how would it be like working with you? Anything like that, that's an opportunity. And then lastly, you have a client, someone that you are actively working for. So what your goal, though, throughout all this process through GDC, and we're on Friday, so I'm giving you advice that you can't really use for the rest of GDC, but hopefully for future conferences, is to actually nurture these prospects. So what you want to do is take leads and opportunities and move them to clients. And the way you actually go about doing that is follow-up. This is actually one of the most important things. I'm going to talk about this a little more. But following up with people you meet, whether it be online or in person is ideal, which is why you're here, that's great. Following up with them, sending them an email saying it was great to meet them within 24 hours of meeting them, or giving them some sort of advice, or maybe they ask you about middleware or something like that. Following up with your potential clients within 24 hours is the most powerful way that you'll actually move people from prospect to lead to opportunity to client. That's the most powerful way. And most people mess this up. They get a pile of business cards, they look at them and say, they're not interested, and then throw them away, or they're just kind of languishing on their desk for months and months and months. And how many of you have done that and just let all your business cards kind of, okay, like one person raised their hand and is honest. So I know all of you have done this, so don't lie to me, I can tell. So when we're talking about finding clients and finding great work, your goal is to move like potential prospects through this funnel through talking to them and following up. This isn't done in a friendly, sleaze-free way. You're not constantly elbowing them in the ribs saying, please hire me, because that's, ooh, we do that too much, and I hear too many horror stories of other composers and sound designers who are just begging for work. That's not the way to do this. Your goal is to actually form some sort of business or friendly relationship with these people. You want to talk to them. You actually want to get to know them. You want to know their game's needs. That's really important, and you want to know how you can actually solve their problem. This isn't just a gig, you are solving their problem because they don't have music, they don't have sound, they don't have voiceover or implementation for their game, and it's really important for them to actually have that off of their plate so they don't need to worry about it. That's what we're doing here. We're actually helping devs not worry about that side of their development so much. So, like I've mentioned, it's good to talk to humans. I'm an extreme introvert, so I had to actually train really hard for the course of a decade to be able so much as look someone in the eye. So talking to humans is really important, and that is actually one of the most important things you can do. In person is ideal. I get asked a lot, how do I find tons of clients online? You can, but generally in person you'll find higher quality clients, and you'll get more prospects and leads and opportunities and clients by talking to people in person, face to face. People will be able to trust you much quicker that way. Now, I get asked a lot, oh, I don't have a reel, or I don't have a website, or anything like that. I can't go to those networking events. Now, this isn't necessarily for you because you're all here at one of the biggest networking events for the game industry, but a lot of people ask me if they don't have a reel or website, is it okay to talk to developers? And absolutely, yes. I didn't have one for like 3 years when I first started, but I still got clients because people just kind of said like, you're cool. Come on board. And that is actually how it works in some cases, especially kind of at a starting level. People want to hire people that they like or that they know or that they trust or that they met in person, someone that they've interfaced with that they know will probably do a great job and won't just disappear off the face of the planet, which may happen more likely with someone they've never met and is completely online and they know nothing about. So even if you don't have a reel and you don't have a website, yes, talk to developers as much as you can, because once you have that website, once you have that reel, once you have all your stuff ready, they'll know who you are already. And you'll have someone to actually talk to about it. And people will be more receptive because they already know who you are. Does that make sense? Does everyone follow? Yes? Cool. So one thing I'll mention to people who are just starting out, people say like, oh, should I say no to things? Like, should I say yes to everything that comes my way? Generally, unless the client is super shady and you're getting a really bad vibe from them, and you're just starting out and you don't know what your strengths are and you're still figuring things out and maybe you don't have paid clients yet, it is a good idea to start saying yes to a lot of things so that you can get a lot of experience. Now again, this doesn't mean necessarily working with bad clients or working with people who give you really bad vibes or are disrespectful, because there's a lot of that in this industry, unfortunately, but I'm not saying you have to do that. But it's a good idea to start saying yes to a lot of things and taking on a lot of work, within reason, obviously, don't sacrifice your health. But taking in a lot of work is really important to getting your strengths and knowing what you like working on and having an idea of what sorts of clients you want to work with and knowing what sorts of things you'll need to say to future clients in the future as you start negotiating, getting contracts, that sort of thing. And lastly, you all know this, but just so you know, some things that you can do is, of course, volunteer at events. That's how I actually started. I was a CA when I first started here, so woo, CAs, I love them so much. But that's how I started. I volunteered at things like PAX or GDC or any local events in Seattle where I'm based to meet people, to meet developers, to say hi to other people, and meet all the other volunteers as well. And that was networking that was kind of done for me. So don't eschew volunteering from your mind. It's really useful. Going to game jams, of course, great idea for experience. Most of you have done this already. And attending local events wherever you're at. And it may not be so local for you. You may need to travel a bit. Some people live further away from hubs than others. You may need to drive a bit or even fly, like I'm sure many of you did to get here. That's worth it. It's worth it to actually attend events and actually talk to humans and get in people's faces, not in a weird way, but talk to people and be actual friends with them. So let's talk about networking on that note a little bit more. So like I mentioned before, you're actually here to make friends and actual relationships. You're not here just to go up to people, hand your business card out, and run away, which is what I certainly did when I started. Woo! So that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. People actually want to form some sort of connection with you. And if they do, they're much more likely to hire you based on that principle. they'll realize, oh, okay, you're easy to work with, you have a good vibe, this will probably go a lot better than someone who just handed me their business card I know nothing about and just ran away. It is worth it to form these relationships, and I'm always about quality over quantity. So if you can talk to people for a little bit longer instead of talking to everybody for 1-2 seconds at a time, that's more important. Having quality over quantity is really, really important. So one thing I'll mention is as you get more advanced and as you become more, well-known in the industry or you start talking to more people, just showing up doesn't really work after a certain point. Yes, if you're starting out, just showing up is great because you don't really know what's going on. Fantastic. Just do that. But if you are a little more intermediate, a little more advanced, your pay rate is increasing, et cetera, making a plan for networking events is really, really, really crucial. I don't just show up anymore. I research speakers. I see who's going to be there. I host lunches. I host events, that sort of thing. You don't necessarily need to go that far, but looking at who's going to be at that event, whether it be speakers or just attendees, especially if it's a local event, you can usually see who's going to be there, is very helpful. You can look at what those people are up to and see what they're working on. If you can walk up to someone and say, oh, I've actually been looking at your game. That's really cool. I'm excited about XYZ. That's much better than tell me about your game, because you've actually put the time in to actually research and learn and actually make an effort to learn about other people instead of hoping other people will just trust you instantly. That doesn't work. That doesn't happen. So don't just show up at a certain point. It's worth researching the event, who's going to be there, who you should talk to. It makes things much easier, and it kills a lot of the small talk, and you can get way easier into better conversations. And like I mentioned, sending emails, researching speakers, sending emails to people who might be there is very important before you go to that event. Like, oh, it'll be great meeting you, I'll be at your talk, or I can't wait to see you at this event, whatever it may be. When I first started in Seattle, I messaged the person who was the head of those meetups. And I just said, oh, I just moved to Seattle, I can't wait to meet you, I'll be at this event. Great. Nothing more than that. I didn't mention I was a composer, sound designer, none of that stuff. But when I showed up, I said, oh, hey, it's so nice to meet you. Like, oh, you sent me that email. Yeah, let me introduce you to some people. Because they already had an idea of who I was just a little bit, and it got rid of the small talk. The stranger danger was kind of gone a little bit. And again, like I've mentioned, follow-up is so important. Now, following up with people within 24 hours, you get a card, they're cool, you don't have to follow up with literally everybody, but if you get someone who's interesting, follow up with them, email them within 24 hours, talk about what you talked about if you had a good conversation, say it was great meeting them, thanks, see you later. It doesn't have to be anything longer than that. Don't do the thing where people send an Encyclopedia Britannica emails, which is what I get 150 of every single week. Please don't do that to me. And it's just like, here's my life story, here's 16 demo reels, please love me. Don't do that. Just say hello, it was great to meet you, and then that's it. Perfect email. So, like I mentioned, you do need a big network, but that'll come with time. The quality actually matters a little bit more, and vibrancy is what actually comes about. And I actually learned this quote was really good from the work-life balance talk that Penka, Brian Schmidt, Jesse, and Larissa gave. And that was really good. I can't remember who exactly, I think it was Penka that said this, I'm not 100% sure. But you do need a big network, that'll come with time, and you do need a vibrant one, which is one that you're following up with and talking to regularly, showing up to local events. Those are the people who have your back. So contracts, will blaze through this really quickly. You can ask me specific questions now or afterwards. Use contracts, even for free projects. A lot of people ask me, like, oh, it's free, whatever. But if you use one, it actually helps determine who owns your stuff. And there is a little bit of a precedent. I'm not a lawyer, by the way. I'm not sure if you could tell. But there's a little bit of a precedent set now where if a contract isn't set, then by default, not always, this is kind of super gray area, the rights can sometimes go to the client instead of you if there's no contract. And you may not want that. You may want the ownership terms really clear. If you're working on a free project and you're not getting anything out of it, which I'll talk about in a second, it is really important to actually make sure you own those rights to that music or that sound, or you're just doing a license, or you want to be clear that they own it so there's no kerfuffle in the future. Now, the two major types of contracts are work for hire, which means that, okay, this client owns all of the stuff that I give them. They own all the music, they own all the sound, they pay me, and we're good. That's usually how it works. So that's what I did for things like Destiny, for example. I make something, they own it, I can't take that and sell that later, right? Pretty simple. That's usually the most common that you're going to run into. Now, there's also non-exclusive agreement, which you can use for clients that may not be able to pay your full rate. What actually happens here is that you retain ownership of your stuff, your music, your sound, whatever it may be, but you're licensing it out to that client. So you're giving it to them for some period of time where they can use it, and then you can sell it to other clients later as well. This makes it cheaper for the client and makes it so that you can make more money off of it in the future. So if you make a whole bunch of sounds, you can then say, okay, you can have these sounds. Maybe you have it exclusively for the next 6 months, let's say. You don't always have to have a timeline, but you usually can. And then you can say, okay, cool, the 6 months is up. I can give this to any other client I want. I can use this in any other future game I want. So you can make a little bit more money off the back end of it as time goes on. So let's talk about charging clients. That's really important. Now, this is a little bit disputed, and I'll give you a little bit of a qualifier on this. Flat fees are really important. I see a lot of people shooting themselves in the foot with per asset rates. That's not necessarily the best way. Not to say it's always the best way, but using flat fees makes it easier for the client. I see so many people say, oh, I charge X amount per sound effect or X amount per minute of music. And especially in the indie world, people will see that rate and be like, that's a blank check. I have no idea how much I'm going to pay this person. Even if they say it'll be 100 assets and it will be $100 per asset, they still don't want to see that. They want you to just throw a number out and use a flat fee. And it makes things so much easier for them to not have to worry about it. They don't get blank check syndrome. It makes things so much simpler. So whenever you can, calculate your fee. Maybe you do per asset in your head, but calculate how many assets, measure it all out, and say, oh, this will be $3,000. Here you go. And maybe you had a per asset fee in your head, but you're giving them the final number. It makes things a lot easier. Not all clients prefer this. This isn't for everything, but it is very useful and makes things a lot smoother and a lot easier. So that's my advice to you. Now, I'm going to send this to you guys for those of you who give me your card and all that. I'm going to give you a template for a project proposal. So when someone asks, like, oh, what's your rate? Instead of just emailing them back, you can actually have a little bit of a PDF where you can send them, you know, here's our timelines, here's how much it's going to cost, here's why it's going to cost this much. Thanks so much. It's a much more professional way to actually give your rates. I can't go into one here, but again, email me or give me your cards or whatever, and I can send that to you. Now, there's something that happens a lot called post-quote silence where, oh, I charge this much, and then no response from the client. How many of you have dealt with that? Yes? Okay. A whole bunch of people have dealt with that. Now, this is a common thing. This is really, really common. This happens a lot. The general reason that this happens isn't necessarily because your price is too high. It does happen because of that sometimes. But usually it's the client sees that and goes like, okay, let me think on that. I'm busy right now. I'll get back to that. And they never get back to it because emails are the worst. So how to actually get around it is to actually, when you give the rate, no response, within about 1 to 2 days, give it a little bit of time for them to respond. I usually say something like, okay, great, I'm excited to get to work on this. I can start on the sword sounds or whatever, some specific thing. I can start on the sword sounds today. How does that sound? It makes it a lot easier for them to say yes at that point. And it makes it so that they're like, oh, right, I forgot to respond to this, yes. Don't mention the money in your follow-up either, because it's really easy for us as artists and freelancers to kind of wring our hands like, oh, I'm sorry I charged $100 for this. Ooh, I'm so sorry, let me just lower this for you. Don't do that. Just say, I'm excited to get to work on this. How about I start on X? Makes it a lot easier for them, and it lets them know that you're actually more motivated as well to actually get started. Now, one thing for those of you who are beginners and you don't know how to respond to the question, how much do you charge? Now, this is usually beginner level only, but not super advanced or other ways. But if someone says, oh, how much do you charge? And you know you have a general kind of tummy number, something in your gut that you know, like, okay, how about like, $1,000 for this or whatever. I'm just making random numbers. And that's really scary for you to say that. I've had so many people say like, oh, I'm so scared to quote. Oh my God, I have to send a $1,11000 to this person. What I usually do in this case when you're that scared and you're not 100% sure if it's too high, what you can do is say something like this. Normally, I would charge $1,000 for this project. Now, I know you're a small indie studio, or whatever qualifier you want, especially if it's a beginner project or student project, whatever it may be. How much of that number do you feel comfortable paying? That puts the ball in their court, but they know what your number is. So you'll often find clients say like, oh, well, okay, I can't do 1,000, but 800's good. But there's a human psychology thing that happens where you can easily say, oh, I normally charge 1,500. Let's say it's for the same project, 1,500 for this. How much of that number do you feel comfortable paying? Oh, we can't do 15. How about 1,200? So you can actually increase your rates actually really, really easily that way. Again, if you're more advanced, I usually just say, here's my rate. I don't really negotiate on that case. But when you're first starting out, it's really terrifying to actually wonder, is this too high? Is this too low? I want to leave a little leeway because I don't know what the rates are. I have no idea. That's the script. I normally charge X. How much of that do you feel comfortable paying? That's usually how you can go. Now, some people ask, can I work for free? Is that okay, especially if it's a student game or something like that? Yes, you can totally work for free. You're not devaluing the industry. But, make sure you're not working for nothing. You can work for free, but don't work for nothing. Most people work for nothing. They think, oh, credit, sweet. No, you have to get credit. In some places, it's the law. Like, that's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. Get something else out of it. It could be tickets to an event like GDC. Maybe the developer can get you there. It may be business card design. It could be web design. It could be teaching you how to code, whatever it may be. Get some sort of something out of it, other than credit. Make sure you get something else, whether it be a skill trade or something like that. That's really important. When I first worked for Penny Arcade, way back, I was their audio guy. I remember the final job I did for them, I was like, how about I do this for free, but you give me free PAX passes forever, as many as I want. Great. I have that now. So I have like endless passes for every PAX that I could ever want. It rules, and that was well worth it. So people ask about side jobs. Should I, can I, is it a good idea? Yes, it's a good idea. I used to clean toilets when I first started, so I was a public pool janitor. I don't recommend that as your side job. It was the worst. It was the smells. I actually had to wear a gas mask. I'm not joking. That's how bad it smelled. So it's okay to have a side job. So many people ask, like, oh, but I need to go all in. No, it's good to have actually some sort of financial stability while you're studying and while you're working on your craft. That is so crucial. And you're not a failure if you have one. You're absolutely not. It's really important to know that. If you are building financial stability and hustling or working on your thing on the side, I consider that a success so long as you keep going and doing your thing. It's only failure if you completely quit and give up and say, no, I'm never doing this again. This is too hard. Or maybe you want to pivot, which isn't failure in and of itself. But if you realize that, okay, I want to do this thing, and you're smart enough to realize you also need money to do it, then that's actually a really smart thing. That's a really smart way of thinking about it. Now, some of you are higher risk than others and want to go all in. Fine, that's totally cool. No worries at all. If you have a higher risk tolerance and can deal with those real financial lows, cool. But I do advocate for most people to have some sort of financial stability because it can be a lot harder to so much as write a note when you're worried about where the next meal is coming from, right? So make sure you have something. So lastly, as a reminder, as we finish up, there's no one right way. This is just me going and me telling you from my point of view. And we're going to wrap up here. We only have a few minutes left for questions. So if you also want to, I'm going to be able to hang out a little bit here before I go to my next talk at 10 with Ryan Ike and Carly Knight on the don'ts, how not to work in game audio. So you can follow me there if you want to as well. Also, we'll be doing that follow-up video call. So please feel free to email me as well any of your questions. Let me know that you're at GDC because I get literally 150 emails a week of people asking advice. So make sure you're at GDC because then I'll actually have a filter set up to make sure I talk to you guys first. You have high priority because I get to meet you in person. I also have business cards here if you want to kind of just grab one and go if you're off to somewhere. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for coming. So we have a couple minutes for questions, so please use the mic just so it goes into the recording. Everyone's so polite.
Yeah, hey, thank you for taking the time today to share your experience. Actually, two things. How do you transition clients that you started on a trade basis?
Okay.
You've got, I would call like a professional rate. I do video production work.
Okay, perfect.
Authoring DVDs. And you start with clients, great people. You're helping them in a small business, with work to get a professional job done. But now you're trying to get other clients. They still demand a lot of time, but they can't move with you to that rate. I mean, how have you handled that?
Yeah, so usually there's a few ways to do it. You can give them kind of a bonus, like a old client rate, like you give them a cheaper rate. But if you don't want, you may not want to work with that company anymore. Let's say like hypothetically, oh, they just can't pay me anymore at all. It's a good idea if there is a hard cutoff, recommend someone else. So that's like good karma for you. But if you want to transition them into a higher tier with you, if you want to bring them to, you're saying your rates are increasing, it's actually not a bad idea, in my experience, to say something like, okay, you know what, I've been doing XYZ a lot, I love you as a client, my rates are increasing to this number for clients now, but I'm going to give you this much because you're such a trusted client. Let me know if that works for you. If it doesn't, I'd be happy to recommend someone else who can do this work for you at a different rate. Because that can give you good karma, and they'll love you for it. Even if you can't work with them anymore and you recommend someone, they'll be like, oh, thank you.
And maybe help get someone else into the biz. Like, hey, here's someone who's starting out. I met him at a networking.
Exactly.
Okay.
And basically you become Google to them, where they'll keep coming to you for references. They will not cut you off if you give some sort of reference. You are kind of the person machine at that point. Like, oh, who else? Oh my God. Oh, we'd love to work with you again. It works really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And real quick, just as a comment on about working a side job, it helped me when I got started to pick the clients I wanted to work with. I didn't have to worry about taking every job to pay the bills.
Yes,
and
you didn't have to worry about terrible clients.
Yeah, you learn more and you get better at your craft.
Perfect.
So.
Thank you.
Akash, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So you specifically mentioned 24 hours as the follow-up time.
Yes.
Have you ever bent that rule?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sometimes I have, but I've gotten so much better results within 24 hours because they remember you much, much easier. And a little trick, the reason I do the 24 hours thing, I never forget their name once I do that. If I follow up within 24 hours, I remember who they are. I literally never forget their name. I remember like their dog's name. I remember everything. And when I see them in 3 years, I'm like, oh, you're still at Google? How's your dog Coco? Like all this stuff. They're like, what? How do you remember this? It's purely because I followed up within 24 hours. So there's a lot working there behind the scenes too. It works really well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
I'm actually a lawyer, so I really appreciated you bringing up the contract aspect.
Yes, sweet.
And I've worked with a lot of people who are just starting out. They've never read a contract before, so I was hoping that for the benefit of the audience, you could say a few words about any kind of cautionary tale, like you didn't think you needed to do something, and then you had some kind of kerfluffle, and like now you learned from a mistake.
Yeah, perfect. So thankfully, I've been using contracts from the beginning, but I can share a general story. I won't name names or anything like that. But I've seen a lot of friends who didn't have a contract. They say like, oh, it's just a handshake deal. It'll be fine, it's fine. The game tanks, it doesn't come out. Who owns the music? Who owns the sound? How do you know? If they had a contract, it would go right back to them. It'd be no problem. But unfortunately, it was completely unclear, and someone I know actually had to go through some legal issues. And it turns out, no, the client owned it. There's no contract. So use one. It's very useful. All right, so our time is out, unfortunately, for today, but I will be hanging out, so thank you so much for coming. Give me your cards and all that sort of good stuff as well. Thank you.